Yeah, okay. All right. Enough with the semantics with this audio. I want to give it up to my good friend Chris from Games You Loved. Chris, besides all the audio crazy stuff, thanks for making it all the way across the pond and joining me today on this Cafe by the Way podcast. How you doing, man?
I'm really well. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. We've been talking about doing this for a while, so I'm finally glad we get to kind of meet over various technologies and looking forward to it, really.
Yeah, I do want to say that I think that a long time ago at E3 we were supposed to uh, I think we were supposed to meet up. I don't know if you remember that. It was like E3, the last E3, I would say. Um,
Yes,
do you remember that?
I do. I was running around the place. It was my first visit, and probably you've been there a few times. When your first visit is a bit crazy, so I run out of hours.
No, I
Um,
know, but it's so good to have you today. But I wanted to like kick things off with more about because you're my first guest that's from the UK, and I'm a big retro collector, and I know that our topic today is going into retro collecting. But I want to like backtrack a little bit, and before you go into what you do for games you loved, tell me a little bit about you and then how you ended up, loving video games. I want to hear that
uh,
story.
how
That's
far
deep.
back do you want to go?
I
How
want to go
far back do you
back.
want to
I want to go
go?
far back. I want you to
Okay.
tell me. You tell me.
I was born in 1973, so clicking on a few years, I guess. And my first probably real experience of as video games, maybe like a lot of children back then, was the kind of family TV game that sort of dad brought home, which was the sports games, kind of tennis, which was Pong. And you turned it, and then there was like a light gun game. I still have it, weirdly, because I keep a lot of things which we'll come on to. And then probably I'd say in the late 70s, 78, 79, it was the arcades. So I was taken there by my grandfather. It's a place in England called Southend. It's probably a bit like uh, is it Coney Island Pier, that sort of
Yeah, in New
setup
York,
really.
like Coney Island. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
Coney Island in the 70s, the equivalent in the UK. It's got a rough kind of a place to be, the arcade, and this little kind of 6-year-old kid, a lot of people
I
smoking around you, and beer cans, and you were kind of in there watching them play Asteroids and Space Invaders, and I was just that was me. I
Could I
was
say something real quick? I want to mention that where you were talking about how the arcades were kind of rough, and I think it was the same in the U.S. Like back in the day, the arcade was where you would be like the bad kids would hang out, smoking cigarettes, being bad
definitely.
teenagers, and it wasn't family friendly. But art, and
Uh,
and and I just wanted to mention it was kind of like that too when I was growing up in the early
there,
days.
there there was to your point, there was no family friendly machines. It was all pure hardcore games. It was games everywhere. Because the games, they made a lot of money. They were very extremely difficult. Obviously, time tore on where people started to master them, but certainly in the early days, there was some tough games out there to play. Robotron, Defender. These are even now for the hardened player. These are tough challenges, and I kind of used to watch people play and sort of try and kind of follow them, and that's something you used to do as well. Used to just stand there and watch other players. That was our social gaming back then, if you like, and I guess any opportunity because I didn't really have a local. I didn't have an urban arcade. It was the seaside. So as visits to the seaside was always, can I get a pocket full of change and play the arcade? I had an older brother as well. He's 4 years older than me, which I kind of touched on earlier. So he kind of took me in there because my mum and dad used to kind of occasionally go in there. My dad likes driving games because he was in the motor industry, so he used to like that. And I think that's why I like driving games because you always used to sit on things like Night Driver. These are the older sort of games. Pole Position was a massive game. 1982. I remember the sit-down version of that was massively popular. And then it was kind of how can we get beyond that TV game and experience it at home? And we were talking just earlier, the interesting piece that I personally, and I know there was some presence in the UK that we didn't have. And you're thinking, where's your Atari 2600, Chris?
Yeah,
Not
where is
many people
Atari
had,
2600?
not many people had it in the UK.
But was it available in the UK?
It was, but I can't remember any of my friends having it at all. And I had a lot of friends into gaming. It was um, I'll show you something here. It was
Yeah.
these weird little things, microcomputers. And also, you guys didn't have microcomputers, but unfortunately, we didn't get kind of consoles. We got a lot of microcomputers, and um, that was the first, if you like, the kit form
Well, you mentioned
ZX80.
to me off the show that NES was not a part of the UK like life that it was in America and Japan, that Japan and America got to enjoy. Can you touch on that since you grew up and around? What why do you did you want the NES? Did you living in the UK, did you know that it existed, but you were like, darn, I live in the UK and I can't get it. And
I,
how am I gonna get it? We don't have eBay. You know,
yeah,
like what was that like?
I'm trying to do the brain recall because it's a long time ago. If I think about 1985, I remember, and you have a similar store. I tweeted about it this morning, and I think I might have got it trending on Twitter. Woolworths,
Yeah,
Woolworths,
we had that when I was a kid. Yep.
Woolworths had it was a reasonably sized department store. Woolworths. They had the NES, I think, but it was pretty expensive. It was the games were expensive. They were maybe 1985. They were kind of £40. It's a lot of money. Maybe 30, but I remember them being expensive. And it's yeah, the Master System was probably more of the thing, as if it was a console. But I just remember, you know, I guess I can't talk for the entire country, but my experience was more with things like the Commodore 64 in the early 80s, and we had the ZX Spectrum. There's also a computer called Amstrad, which was developed by Lord Sugar from The Apprentice in the UK, and
Who?
he
Lord
brought out
Sugar? What?
variations.
What did you say?
Yeah,
Who's Lord?
Lord Sugar,
What's Lord
Alan
Sugar?
Sugar. Uh,
Can I look him
so
up?
you,
Alan Sugar?
yeah, Alan
Alan.
Sugar. Yeah. So he's
Oh,
still
right. He's
around.
a lord. I'm sorry. You guys have lords in
We
England.
do.
My bad. I tend to forget about the culture difference. Like, I was like, this guy's cool. He's a lord. But this is him, right? I think all these
Yes, that's
versions
right.
of. All right,
So
cool.
he kind of brought out business computers. He also brought out the Sinclair name as well and developed his own computers. But I just remember, it all being around, all this kind of stuff. These tape games. So you used to go and pick up your tape games uh, in specific game stores, but they used to be. A, a, I guess maybe you experienced this with Atari 2600. They were everywhere. You used to go into like chemists and newsagents. Um, you could pick up these little kind of cheap budget games everywhere. And that was our thing. On a Saturday morning, we would get the bus and see what game was there. Often we didn't know what the game was about. We hadn't even read the review. I have got some old gaming magazines. That's my other obsession. So this is an old UK gaming mag called
Nice.
Crash from 1985. I like collecting these and reading these. It's like a time traveling thing for me to read a review as it was written 20, 30 years ago is quite
Well,
a fun thing to do.
that was our internet. When we
It
were
was.
looking for reviews, we went to, gaming mags, and I enjoyed gaming mags. We had a few that were really popular. One was called Electronic Gaming Monthly, Game Pro, of course, Nintendo Power. Did you guys have Nintendo Power?
We
Or
had a
probably not,
version of
right?
it. Yeah, we had a version. I've got one down here actually. Because this is the thing, we always kind of got versions of
And what's up, David
imported
and
somewhere around here.
Cape? Cape, thanks for coming.
Yeah, it was called. I think it was called Nintendo System. Strange name for a magazine. and that carried on through to the Super Nintendo as well. Period. But no, we didn't get Power, which is a great mag. I love the Power magazine.
Nice.
We just didn't couldn't get our hands on that one because the say the NES. I don't know what the exact figures were, but I don't think it sold more than 1 million units in the UK. And I believe the Master System was about on a par with it, probably at least. So, but yeah, just to kind of talk, it was more about the kind of cassette games, and obviously then it moved on to the disc games of the Amiga and the Atari ST. So the stuff like this, the old
I
3.5 inch floppy disks.
Those are amazing, and I have some photos here, and these are actually from Chris's collection. He shared with me, and I've definitely seen these on some of your awesome posts that you have. But I'm showing you have all those mini, like the collapsible games, the handheld games from the day. Um,
Yeah, no, that's my passion. The Game and Watches from Nintendo.
yeah,
Definitely love those.
those are cool. And then the Lynx collection you have. Wow, look at that. I love the Lynx. Lynx was awesome. Well, there's an Atari product that you had a lot of, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think I remember getting that with my pal. I was about 15 years old, and you could only perhaps afford 2 or 3 games. When I was doing my paper round, I guess, to earn money, but to buy the links, and I just played California games over and over. Like that was my thing. And I think I used to like Zybots, great arcade game as well. Amazing looking machine, the Zybots arcade cabinet as much as anything. And then Road Blasters is a great port on the Atari Lynx as well.
I
One
love
of
the
the
Lynx.
best.
I had it. I
Yeah.
was a big fan. Um, yeah, so that's interesting. And then when you were collecting games, or I mean, not that you were collecting games, but when you were actually, you know, buying the games back then, because it wasn't collecting back then.
No.
It was like we're buying these to play. When did you start to notice that? Wait a minute, these are becoming collectibles. When did it change for you? When did you start realizing, whoa, look at all the stuff I still have, all the stuff I kept, and now I'm kind of
Yeah.
into collecting them. Like when did that shift happen? You grew up through the generations. What's the shift like to realize, "Oh my god, I'm a collector." Like when did that happen for you?
Quite a deep question, my friend.
Hey, we go deep.
You know why? This is deep because it's kind of partly it's two things. One, it's the question of what is retro, which always brings up different opinions, and then it is why you do this. And so I try and break it into a couple of small parts.
Okay.
So I I kind of hit a sort of age, shall I say, where I started to look back, and I think everybody's got this hidden little kind of um, I don't know what you call it, sort of implant in their arm where they hit retro gaming. It's like you suddenly start to stop kind of looking at that, PS in the future, be the PS7 or whatever you're playing, and then you'll look back at your PS3. I'm just trying to draw the analogy of, when you're looking to the future, this will always happen. Okay, retro gaming is never going to ever stop being a thing because I think it's kind of part of nostalgia, the whole thing. So it can happen at a different age. I reckon it sort of tends to kick in, um, for our generation, sort of around the age of 25. But things have kind of moved on a bit because it's so mass market now, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I think I like the idea of gaming is mass market because it's more of a broader appeal. But retro gaming now is like part of gaming culture. Back in the kind of late 80s, especially, people couldn't wait to move on to the next system. They didn't want to do the previous 8-bit, 16-bit. They wanted 32-bit. They wanted 64-bit. It was that very 90s thing. Oh, and the next, and it was all big and brash, and that was the world back then. Nobody wanted to look back. Um, but I think for me personally, I suppose everybody's got a different story. I started to look back about 1998, um, and just pick at, a few things that I'd kind of missed but they weren't that long ago. I didn't go back to the ZX Spectrum. Um, I just, I kind of mentioned earlier, I went back and bought myself a Sega Saturn, and I think
which
about
is my
2000.
favorite. And I wanted to show you the American jewel case. Had the kind of white look.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be cool.
This is actually a great. This box is in such good shape. But look, I even have the cute little foam they give you with the.
Oh wow,
So you have the foam. I don't know what this foam really did for you. It didn't do much, but I just wanted to show you. This is a good copy of a
that's
jewel case.
beautiful.
Yeah. Um. So yeah.
So, so, so do you think it's important to keep your games in a good condition? Then do you like to sort of store them in very carefully?
Uh. Good question. Uh. I have a good mix of loose games versus box games. I try my best to keep them in a very organized area. I'm not the most organized person in the world, um, but I've done a better job of doing that, which is fun. My collection isn't as big as yours, but my Sega Saturn collection, believe it or not, is growing pretty strong. And I'm like a focus collector, I like to say. I like to kind of pick one and move in that lane. And my lane for the last like 2 years has been the Saturn and the GameCube, believe it or not. Um,
Nice.
so I've been focused on the GameCube too because the GameCube is hitting its retro stride now. Where I would go into my retro video game store and I'm looking at the GameCube section used to be packed with plenty of games. Now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like a scarce area, and it's hitting its moment in retro. It's becoming popular and expensive. The games,
Mm,
especially in America, I think I made a mistake. They had Mario Sunshine for like $30, maybe like a year ago, and I should have bought it, but I was like, nah, I'd rather spend the $30 to buy like 10 games as opposed to one
yeah.
game. And now I regret it because I think Mario Sunshine goes for about 60 ish, close to 70
Wow,
now in America. Um,
that's crazy.
yeah, yeah, it is crazy. But now, because of our climate and this interesting world we're in now, I feel like the more we go forward, the harder it's going to be to collect retro video games, um, and the more expensive they're going to become.
Mm,
And I think that that's a really interesting thing to think about. Is that and that's why right now we're in a window where within the next 5 to 7 years, if you're not collecting retro video games, you're gonna miss the boat, and they're gonna be too expensive to try to go back to. Not everything. I don't know if you feel the same, and I'm jumping a little ahead here,
no, no.
but it's
So
kind
can
of
I?
like an interesting thought. So I want to know what do you think about? Do you think that's correct? Do you think that the more years we're moving forward, the less availability of collecting there is, and the more expensive it's going to become for anyone to even buy the old stuff?
Without question, yeah. I think I've got some tips which I'm going to bring in.
I want your
But you
tips.
got you are absolutely, there's no way about what you're saying, because it's a proliferation of many things that have caused the price hike. It's you and I are responsible for it, believe it or not.
We are very.
YouTubers, Twitch
Yep.
streamers, content creators, not in a intentional way, but we've made it more available, and it's become it's an exciting hobby. It's a great hobby. I'll explain games you loved a little bit. Why I got into the journey, as I call it, of creating the brand, is once you start to find out about all the stuff, if you like, to do with the hobby, it's like, why didn't I get into this earlier? It's a whole community, and you want to spend all your money and time invest in it as well. So it's really on the radar, on the map. I started GYL 8 years ago when I physically started it, but I was thinking about it way before that, and sort of pre YouTube almost days. I kind of thought of something like Games You Love back in 2002. It just took me 10 damn long years to actually come along and do it. But the people in the early days, the YouTubers, you could count, maybe 50 people. How many retro gaming YouTube channels are there now?
Oh,
Is
it's
tens of
unbelievable. I mean,
thousands.
actually, I was going to mention a couple of them, like Angry Video Game Nerd, for instance. Um,
Yeah, he was one of the first for me,
he
definitely.
actually, he, I'd like to say that, and I'm going to pull him up on the screen. And believe it or not, um, Chris, I got to interview him on on a digital interview a few years ago, and it was really cool. He was an amazing guy, but one thing people have to realize about him is that he is one of the first kind of YouTubers to say, "I'm going to show people me playing the video game on screen. Like I'm going to reference the game on screen that I'm playing it." He figured out screen capture. He was one of the first people to really bring in the game he actually wanted to review and play it on screen. Um, so he's also a Jersey guy, where I'm from in America. I'm in LA right now, but so I got a lot of props for guys like Angry Video Game Nerd, and there's guys like Metal Jesus. I don't know if you know Metal Jesus at all.
I do, yeah. Yeah.
Also, just an awesome example. I'm trying to see his. He's like 6 foot something. I saw him in person once. Um, I was trying to pull him up,
Yeah,
but
yeah, he's very tall. John Riggs is tall as well, isn't he?
yes,
He's in the crew. They were like 6'6", those guys.
yeah, and Metal Jesus is a great example of these early people too. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So you're saying that obviously with all the content creating and the social media right now, it's helping propel retro video gaming into this awareness of this existence. Because you're right.
It's yeah, it's one of many. So the other things are, so I work. We'll talk a little bit about what I do. So I work in the industry.
Yep.
So Nintendo have been doing it for many years. Old IPs, old IPs are being, HD versions of games are being created, all across the board. All publishers from Capcom through to Bethesda and Doom, and so those old games are getting new versions of them, some fantastic remakes as well. So people are looking back and going, "Oh, I want to play the original Doom. I want to play the original Castlevania." Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you've also got that really interesting quirk of some have continued anyway, but some have been recreated. Obviously, Streets of Rage 4. I could go on, so that's another kind of area. The other piece is, I haven't really talked about this one, but I think it's definitely a thing, is our generation just don't want to buy antiques. We're not that interested in, I'm not anyway. I think a pop culture item on the shelf is much more interesting than a kind of pocket watch or something. I mean, I still collect. I collect some bits and bobs, but not to the extent of games. So I think our generation will be on the. I mean, you've got the I can't remember the name of the show now, like an antiques roadshow we call it in the UK. The pawnbrokers, that's the one. So those are going to be the shows because people want to go on and find out what their, sort of mint copy of Snatch is worth in 20 years, and your version of Panzer Dragoon, who knows what that's going to be worth? They're going to be,
Yeah.
it's going to be worth more than a Tesla share at this rate.
Uh
So
huh.
games we're only at the beginning of something, which for me, I have to draw the analogy is comic books. So imagine comic books. I stupidly, I have to admit it, I sold a comic book which I should never have done in 2000. I sold a Hulk #1, my worst ever thing I've ever done. So you imagine straight after this, a few years later, the Marvel Universe came out. That comic book's worth 50 times what I sold it for. Um, but that's the deal. Games in the same way will rise up the value of comic books. Spider-Man #1 probably 30, 40 years ago was not worth the
No.
kind of money that it's worth now. And I think games will have a similar value. That they will, like you say, there's more demand for them, more people willing to pay that extra money, and the price will creep up because demand is exceeding supply on those much rarer games. So that's the other thing of it. I think there's a culture of people like to collect collectibles. Um,
Yes. And
and then the final thing is Nintendo. Go on Instagram and look up Nintendo hashtag and Game Boy. It's just you've got not just it's every generation. You know, you've got 6-year-old kids wanting to collect Game Boys from 30 years ago. We go to gaming events. There are little kids with their mums. They want a Game Boy from the 90s, even though it was out 20 years before they were born. So you've got everybody's collecting. It's, whereas I suppose when I was collecting 20 years ago, it was just us older guys now, if you like, kind of getting into it. Sort of I was 25, sort of around 1999, and it was kind of a very niche hobby to collect old retro games, whereas now it's become much more of a broader thing. So, which I think it's great, but obviously the downside is the price.
yeah,
We're all paying extra, but there's a few little ways around it. You see, which
yeah, I believe that you're right. And I think that going back to comic books are the next, I'm sorry, video games are the next big collectible. Um, where comic books have always been a great collectible, but have failed in some generations. Comics have lost their value, but good examples the early '90s in comic books. It was going downhill, and then Image Comics came out and kind of hit like a new generation of people, and it kind of bounced back. And now, with the advert of Marvel movies, it's made comics kind of people are looking at comics again, sort of. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I am so still to this day upset that my mom tossed out most of my childhood when I was in
mm,
college. So, you know, here's the interesting thing from my perspective where you seem to be someone that collected and didn't throw things out or think about like oh man I should hang on to this most of the time. My thought process when I was younger didn't think like that. We had a stack, Chris. We had so many Nintendo NES games, they would stack on the wall. Like I was very lucky. Me and my brother had a stack, and we would even like do the height thing like you would with a kid like growing. That we would
yeah,
stack
yeah,
our NES games. And if I could go back in time and say, "Hey Andy, when you're in college and your mom calls you and says, "Hey, do you want these games anymore?"
we've all
Remember to
been
say
there.
yes and not mumble no, cuz when I was in college, I my mom called me and I still remember I was like kind of
Yeah,
like didn't give a crap. I was like partying. I was like
yeah,
and don't get me wrong, I had a Dreamcast in my dorm room. That gives you an idea of my generation. Um,
mm,
I still love games, but I still remember that phone call and I'm like, why did I tell her to do that? Like, what is
yeah,
wrong
yeah. I
with
know,
me?
I know, I know. I
uh,
mean, I didn't keep everything, Andy. I'm not a saint. So, but I did keep a few things.
but
I
you've
guess that's where I was at.
but you have rebuilt your childhood, like I like to say. You've been buying back a lot of the things or getting
Oh
and
yeah,
trading the things that you loved. So that's very much like what I do as well. Um,
that was the collecting part of games you loved. It was like, what things did I either own myself and want to re-own? I couldn't afford, or yeah, mainly I couldn't afford, and therefore I'll go and buy it now. And then also the last one was my buddies had it, and I was jealous, so I kind of wanted that as well. And I've spent the last 20 years kind of trying to complete that idea really. And
yeah.
I've nailed it mainly. There's a few little kind of interesting to know what yours are. There's a few machines, consoles. I'd like to get more hardware actually than games now, but most of it I've kind of got. But I went the wrong way round, and I'll drop it in as we talk. That's my first tip. So
What's your first
as
tip?
a
Wait, I got to hear the first tip.
It's so
What's up,
simple.
Moon?
Some things are very practical. Make a list, right? You cannot go wrong when you're collecting of making a list and kind of why, and almost break it into why are you collecting in that list. So
Yeah.
one part might be games that are fun and nostalgic, or perhaps more just nostalgic. Um, Ones that you think will photograph well. I always very keen to sort of take photographs and things that look, that's kind of that's something that I want to get into, and sort of get into photography. So started an Instagram, and then one that people don't like to admit, but I'm going to say it. And I don't purposely go out and do this, but we're all
Here we go.
human. Is ones that could be worth more money in the future. There's a difference between scalping and having a head on your shoulders when it comes to money. And sometimes all of us spot a bargain and go in the perhaps the could be a flea market or whatever. And it's like you'd be mad to turn down a game that is worth more money. So make a list of a few of those gems, and if they pop up, then you know about them. A lot of these, there's the obvious ones, isn't there? Little Samson, and the Nintendo World Championships, and that. Avoid that. That's never going to happen. You're never going to see those out in the wild. But
I have a
some of
picture
those,
of that actually.
you'd
It's
be very
very
lucky.
valuable.
I know Game Chasers picked up a little Samson on a video once, but stuff like this is the stuff of legends. But less, middle of the road titles that you might see. I kind of kept a list, and got a very nice copy of Castlevania New Generation once for not much money, because I had it on my list, of things to get. So always, on your phone, however you want to keep it, on a notepad, have a little list. Linked to that also is a psychological one. Don't rush into it, and look at what you've got at home before you go out, because the, these tips are often, in fact, all of them are based on my mistake. So I kind of didn't do all these things. Funnily enough, I
Ah,
do them a lot. I do them a lot now, and that's how I live my life. Make one mistake and learn from it. So I used to go and buy like huge job lots of games from I guess what you call them, flea markets. Come home, my wife would be like, "What are you doing? Where are you going to put that stuff?" And I'd have boxes and boxes, and I'd be full of wires and random controllers, and I'd have to sort through them all. So I didn't have a very good strategy, and quite you'll find this amusing. When I moved house, we had the removal lorry for our furniture, and the removal lorry for my games was twice the size of the house furniture, because I had so much stuff I needed to move, and I have over the years got rid of it a bit. But yeah, don't make the same mistake as me, because you kind of want to get a bargain. Otherwise, you just end up living in cardboard boxes, kind of like I did, really. So there's another tip. Shall I keep going, or?
I want it. I mean, I like the tips. And I think they're very important. So I'm trying to think of. Yeah, just keep going, keep going. I want to hear more.
So the other one that weirdly did very well for me, and it's kind of how I guess get this out again. So this is quite a rare computer, actually. I think they go for, in this condition, probably about dollars wise, $200. Um, the reason I got this, and a fair few others, is especially if you work in a workplace with a lot of people, tell people you work with that you collect, and tell your friends and tell your family, put it on your Facebook. Oh, I'm collecting retro games. You will not believe how many people come out of the woodwork. Tabers. I got donated so much stuff, but from work leagues, by telling them that I collect retro games. Now it doesn't work where I work now, because I work in the video games industry, and nobody's going to donate anything, because we're all hanging on to our stuff. But when I worked in kind of graphic design in a studio. I literally got a mega CD with about 20 games. I got an Amiga with a brand new Amiga 1200 with about 100 games. I had a VIC-20 Commodore 64, that computer, from Lynn, our receptionist, she's in her like late 60s. She's like, "I've got this old computer at home. I don't. Nobody wants to do anything with it. Do you want it? And I'm like, yeah, I want it. Give it to me. So that really bared a lot of fruit to me when I started to first collect video games, like retro games. Um, I've kind of built up a reasonable collection from just friends and family. Really, it's one that people don't really kind of think about. It's like, oh, I'm sure that you know my uncle hasn't got anything, or my sort of my grandparents, but maybe they have, or maybe a friend or who isn't into what you do has got something, so and they just want to get it off their hands. So I think that's it's quite a good one to kind of put out there, really. So you're almost being seen as a collector and somebody who's into the hobby, really. I don't know if you've ever done that. Do you tell your kind of non-gaming friends, like, that you collect video games? Have you ever
I think,
gone down that road?
believe it or not, a lot of people have always, I've been always outright and honest about my love of video games through working in the entertainment industry. People knew that because I used to podcast about video games for a long time. It goes as far back as like 8 years ago. Right now, I'm doing it differently. I used to do it like on iTunes and whatnot, but now I'm trying to like broaden it to streaming, so I could reference and visualize it. But it's still like an audio podcast. Technically, if you listen to it, you can understand it. But I've never been afraid to tell people, and I'll even say this when I've gone on dates with girls. I've always been open and honest that I'm a nerd. I like video games. I like to collect video games because I'm I don't believe in that closeted like stigma that a lot of gamers went through where people would judge us based on being nerdy and that we liked video games, and I experienced that. But as I got older, I was like, screw it. If you don't like that I
Mm,
like video games, then whatever. So friends that I have that don't give a crap, they're like, "Oh, Andy, that's such a you thing." Like and I appreciate that because that means they know that I like that. Just like they might like to do bottomless mimosas on Sundays, brunch.
yeah,
I like to go to the retro video game store, something like that. So
yeah,
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 I'm more open about it than ever nowadays.
yeah. No,
Biff says my childhood system was the TRS-80, and it only brings back memories of knocked off games and broken controllers. I would never go back to Monkey Kong on cassette. Um, Genzo said, one of my old bosses sold antiques on the side, and he said that the niche trading market is difficult to make money off of. And then, yes, Moon, we know we're having a little bit of audio issues, but we're just rolling with it, and the show must go on. And then Biff said a little earlier, wait, Genzo said that I was playing my GameCube a few weeks ago. Oh, okay, in reference to when we were talking about GameCube a while ago. Um, but yeah, how do you feel about that stigma? Like, do you feel like that's still something that people should, like, don't you think people should be a little bit more, that because of mainstream explosion of gaming, that people
mm.
shouldn't be shy about the fact they love video games anymore, even with your non-gaming friends? Do you think that that's still a stigma?
Just trying to think. I mean, because I'm in the industry, I've been, so I got my job really because of my kind of passion. Really, it led in a kind of indirect way to what I'm doing. So I work in a video games job. There's no stigma. It's almost like if you're not into gaming, there's a stigma. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like you don't play games and you work for a video games company. What's the matter with you? That's it's kind of like a bit the other way around. Not as severe as that, but I've worked. I worked in a kind of ad agency, and yeah, I was known as the gamer. The gamer guy.
So like they
It was
stereotyped us as gamers. So you're saying your job stereotyped you as the gaming guy, right?
Yeah, it was. It was like get the Game Boy, but it wasn't like it wasn't so much an insult. It was just like they knew that was what I did, and I got this stuff donated to me, so I was kind of cool about it very often. But I can't remember in a team of 35 people that many people were particularly into it. Casual gaming, a couple of people in the business, but it wasn't really the topic of conversation. that often. And I suppose I found that a little frustrating because for me, it's the thing that I want to talk about most. So
Right.
you know, that's where I kind of, you know, I wanted to explore perhaps new people, and you know, I suppose I'm not. I don't know if this is the right analogy really, because it's just a bit of an odd one, but and it's by no means I'm on this level, but you know, similar way to Zuckerberg started Facebook, I started Games You Loved because I was like, who's out there? You know, how can I find other people like-minded like me? I have no idea if anybody else is particularly into what I'm doing. And Games You Love was started to it was the philosophy of it was about other people, not about me. It was sharing other people's memories, collections, stories, I suppose, about how you got into gaming, what games you find most popular, what are you collecting at the moment. And it was a creative idea. My background's in branding. I'm not a marketing person. I am, I would say, a marketing person. I'm more into kind of brand development and how brands evolve. So I wanted to see, like, could I start a brand that would almost bring people together, starting to talk about this stuff. I saw a little bit of a smattering of it on Twitter um, 10 years ago, but it was, you know, it was quite early days. 10 years ago on social media is a long time ago. It really does feel like a long time ago. So I thought, let's come up with a name because the hook is in the name. It took me a while to come up with a name, and I sort of had Games Were Us for a while, which was sounded awful. Um, sounded like
Okay.
Toys Are Us. And my brother-in-law is a writer, and he kind of said, "Why don't you just twist the words around?" And as soon as I got the name, I was like, "That's it! I found it. It's Games You Loved." And I set up the Facebook, set up Twitter, just started to kind of, you know, ask questions, not just say, "Hey, look at my stuff." You know, what's your favorite Sega game? You know, what show me what you've picked up recently. All the stuff that goes on now, I was doing from the very beginning. You know, show me your shelves. Let me share your shelves on, you know, gaming shelves. All this kind of, you know, more about other people, and that's really what Games You Loved has always been, I suppose. It's only recently a few mates of mine, um, you know, said, "Why don't you sort of show your face occasionally?" I've only really been doing that in the last couple of years. It was always about not about me, because you know what's great about me? I'd rather just show things about other people, you
Yeah.
know. And there's plenty of other things going on with the personality stuff, but and I think my skills are more in I guess what can you call it, like as a producer, like curating. That's kind of what my background is, sort of managing lots of things I do a lot of project management, always have, and I enjoy supporting a lot of creators, I guess. Kickstarters is a big sort of part of what we do. So there's lots of Kickstarters happening this year at the moment, whether it be hardware, software, events, movies. We like to share news. It's yeah, it's like a hub, isn't it? A community hub is what somebody
I
described
love
it
it.
as the other day.
You support me.
That's
You've supported me on some stuff, and I appreciate that. And I love to support you as well and what you're doing. You guys are all over the map when it comes to like retro games. You guys got some awesome photographs of some like amazing stuff. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. So thank you so much for your
no,
contribution to the retro community.
doing the best I can, as I say, every
Doing
day.
doing the best I can. Do you happen to know Joel, who's called the Last Gamer? He's an
I know,
Australian.
Joe.
You do you know him personally?
I do. Yeah, yeah. I've had a few interactions with Joel over the years. Always positive. Some quite
Amazing
funny
collector.
ones.
Amazing
He is.
collector.
He is. I did
And
a thing with him once where I said, "I bet I've got 3 games you don't have," which is quite a claim for Joel, isn't it? And he said, "Go on then." And I said, "Right, you know." obscure British games. And he's like, "Oh yeah, you're probably going to get me." So I said, if I can give you 3 games that you haven't got, I'll send them to you. And one was a game from Jeff Minter. I think it's called Night Gunner. And one was I think it was Populous on the PC Engine CD. Didn't have that. And one was another title. So I sent it to him, and Joel made a video about it. It was great, and he reviewed the games, and obviously just was so thankful. And that's the thing about Joel. He's everybody kind of look, oh, he's got loads of money, and look at all his collection, and he's the most down to earth person I've ever kind of engaged with, and I've followed him for a long time. He's probably one of the earlier
Me
ones
too.
I used to follow as well when he had a much smaller kind of space and collection, really. So yeah, no, he's a good guy, definitely.
Do you know what I like about him is that he literally builds his like extensions of his arcade. Like he builds the walls, he builds the
I know.
buildings. He is like no matter how wealthy he might be, he's just really smart about how he made money. He used to sell cars, he used to
Mm.
remake cars. Like this guy is fantastic. And when he shows his old videos of how he built like an extension to his house just so he could have an arcade is unbelievable. He just knows how to save money, believe it or not, while he's collecting these games. And now his collection is fantastic. I actually spoke to I think it's his cousin Jess. I think,
Yeah, yeah,
and he will. I do want to get him on the show eventually because I'd love to talk to him. But I like how he like shows you, like he did a whole episode like thing about how he was building, an extension to his house just to get his arcade in there, and I thought that was fascinating. That he like he's like way more than just a collector. He's like literally like building the spaces and like his arcade looks like an arcade from the 80s like and it's in this one house that is just for his arcade machines like the guy blows me away. So I'm glad that you know him because I wanted to bring him up. And
yeah. No, he's a good guy. And
and
there's there's a few in Australia. There's Emily, retro gamer girl. She's got a pretty sound collection. She's got an awesome Instagram account as well. And there's also Alex Boz, who's the Oz retro
I know
gamer. He's a
Alec,
good,
yeah.
really good guy. If lockdown hadn't happened, in fact, I was seeing you this year. It would have been E3 and PAX Australia, but
I was
we'll
going to
have
be at
to
E3 this year again, of course.
We'll have
So
to have to do that another time, unfortunately. So
yeah. Yeah, and we're kind of coming close to an end here. But I do want to close any kind of like final thoughts you might have about and I want this to be directed at people that are interested in getting into collecting now. How would you tell someone that was getting into that said, "Listen, I grew up in the console era. I don't have any games anymore, but I want to get into retro collecting, especially in this unprecedented time." What are your final thoughts to someone like that, and what do you recommend? How would you get started at even doing a retro collection? Like, what are your final thoughts?
um, so if you're literally starting from new, is that what you're saying? So
Scratch.
you've come into it. You haven't really bought any games particularly, but you like the idea of it, don't you? Is
Yeah,
that what
that
you're saying?
you want to you love video games so much that you want to go back, and yes, you want to start fresh. And how do you even do that? How do you do that?
Follow us. Follow games you loved,
Okay,
and
follow games you
it's a
love.
good start. I'm not just PRing myself, but if you follow our channel, particularly Twitter, you kind of, I wish I could have done this like 10 years ago. You kind of start to see the community and what everybody else is into and what they're collecting and the kind of conversations and the chat and your stream and this YouTube video. And because we are the hub of kind of sharing a lot of this stuff, it's almost like sponge that up first and kind of, oh, what I'm seeing all this, and what do I like about it?
Right.
And then start to pick and choose. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to kind of just focus on Game Boy games, or no, I'm just going to. I'd like to go for the '90s. That's my era. So it's kind of like find your thing. Don't follow the crowd. Don't follow, just somebody because it's you want to be like that person. Do it for you. Find out what's your passion, what's the thing that lights your spark. I'm 47 years old, nearly me, and I still get excited, and I get excited every day because of old video games. And that's the thing that's kept me going through lockdown, quite honestly, a lot of the time. But I've got these kind of joyful experiences to still to kind of play. And I do like, weirdly, collecting and looking at the box, seeing this and opening it up and putting the cartridge in. So find your one thing that you really or several things that you really want to get into. I'd say that's a really important bit of advice as a philosophy of kind of retro gaming. And I guess if you are going to go and buy, then the challenge is kind of, maybe, I don't know what it's like in the US, but a lot of the flea markets and things like that aren't so prevalent, but they are a good bargain way of buying games, and it's quite a fun day out if you can do that. Um, eBay's always there, of course, but just obviously shop around. Don't just buy it, get the buy it now sort of price. So yeah, that, and maybe Facebook groups are always good as well. But I've got some pretty good bargains going to what we call car boot sales, flea markets. You had a picture of a Master System up there, which was mint, brand new and boxed. I paid like £10 for that 3 years ago at a car boot sale. So that's a really good, sort of inexpensive way of picking up games. You just have to keep hunting and going back, and eventually you'll pick up a bargain. Really,
Dude,
that's
that's
my
that's
bit of
your
advice for
that's
today.
that's really good advice. And everyone, check out gamesyouLove.com. And you guys are available on Twitter. You guys are on Instagram. You guys are on YouTube. That is the person to follow. I also on my Twitter, I retweet and support Chris all the time because I love the stuff that you post, man. And then check out Numbskull. They have these really cool like arcade machines. I don't even know how big are those. Those are pretty neat. Can you show those?
Yeah, so it's a quarter
Oh
scale.
man, look at
This is
that.
the 40th anniversary Pac-Man machine. But we've got five of those out: Gallagher, Galaxian, Miss Pac-Man, and Pac-Man. And also, as Dig Dug is the next machine. And we have Space Invaders and Bubble Bobble and Track and Field on the way, really. So
I'm
if you
so
haven't got much
excited.
space in your game room, they're pretty decent, really. So they fit in quite comfortably.
I can't wait to try one because I'm a big fan of the arcade culture. I'm and this is so nostalgic to have one of these. So please check out Numbskull as well. Um, and Chris, I guess my final thought for collecting, since I've been getting into it, is don't be stupid. Don't spend if you're looking at something on eBay and you immediately have that kind of like conscious behind you say, don't buy this. You know this is wrong. Do not spend $150 on this one game. You should listen to it because I mentioned I think I mentioned this off the show with Chris is that, or maybe on here is that I could have bought a game that is $50 as one game in a retro store, but I could take that $50 and buy maybe 5 to 10 games at the same store that might not be as valuable as that one game, but maybe over time, that group of games I purchased might actually be valuable, like you said, in 20 years. So please be smart with your money. Don't go crazy like me and buy a Sega Saturn game that might be $100. But I do my best in checking eBay, the buy it now prices. I do a good job at focusing on what I think my budget entails. Do not try to kill your wallet. I'm not going to say you won't have you won't have that experience at one point or another. We all do it. We all overspend on something. Like for instance, they're doing the reprint of Battletoads, and I just ended up buying that, and it's like $100 US, and I'm
Wow.
like, all right, why did I do that? But I did it, and I'm excited to have that because there's only 2,000 of them being printed, so I pre-ordered one. Why not? Um, Chris, I want to apologize, everyone. I know that the audio was a little off today. We apologize, but I think Chris, it was just like amazing to have you on the show. Thanks for being patient, and thanks for all your great insight. And we should do this again,
Definitely.
because I think we should pick up on some other things that we might not have been able to go to because of time. And obviously, we are across a far pond. I'm all the way in Los Angeles, so this is my first episode with a gentleman from the UK, and just goes to show you that, you know, no matter what, during this time, we have the ability to connect, do a show together. We don't need to be in the same room. I want to send you out. You know, be safe out there, Chris. And again, follow, follow games you loved. I think it's just like that. You have YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Numbskull, uh, Inspiration Design. Is that
That's
wait?
it.
Numbskull Inspiration Designed. So let's give it up for Chris. Thank you so much for everyone that showed up. Biff Bufflington, Genzo Chicken, No Fear, Moon Nana. I know David Alexander was here. I know Xephier was here. Thank you so much for everyone that was lurking as well. We're gonna raid someone together, Chris. Do you know what a raid is on Twitch, Chris?
I'm retro. I'll just follow your lead.
Okay, so a raid is where we take the people that are with us right now and we bring them to another channel when I end my show. So I essentially raid someone in order to just kind of, and I pick someone random. It's his name is Roger Stiller. It looks like he's playing an old golf retro game. So we are gonna raid this person. And I do want to say, Chris, thanks so much for coming on the cafe, by the way,
Thanks for having
podcast.
me.
It was so much fun to talk to you, and we need to do this again and
Definitely.
get everything in order. And I think I'd be happy to have you back, and I'd love to have you back because there's a million other things we could talk about. Thank you so much, my friend, and
Thank you, dude.
we'll catch you soon.
Definitely. See you later.
Thanks, Nate. All right, so what happens is right now they get sent